Hello, and welcome to episode 14, maybe 15. No, 13, according to my graphic, of If Supr Says It. This particular episode is a first. This is a Supr-only episode, and the reason it's a Supr-only episode is because this is going to be an SI 2023 in review episode, where we're mainly going to be talking about stats, some of the results, some of the things that we may see happening going forward. And to be honest, there's just not a lot of back and forth needed when talking about something like that. So, when I say review, it is going to be covering all those things. We're going to take a look at the bracket, see how that worked out. Obviously, you know the champion is G2, who defeated W7M in the finals. Talk about the format of the tournament a little bit, because I do have some thoughts on that. And then we'll take a look at the CGG, check out the stats, notice anything. For instance, if you look down here, every single map at the tournament was defender-sided besides border, which is 49%. You know, is the game all of a sudden, did Solus skew the game that much into a defender-sided game where now attacker repick is essentially meaningless? I guess we'll see. So, let's hop into the bracket first and just talk about some things. Obviously, if you watch the If Supr Says It episode with Yardy, where we updated our playoff predictions, you'll see that we did talk about groups, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. And we did make playoff predictions, of which we were very wrong for the most part. But I just think we go over it for those of you that maybe missed SI or didn't pay that close attention to it. The highest placing LATAM team at SI were probably the tournament favorites going into into the major, which is W7M. W7M, arguably the best team over the course of the entire year, but not winning a tournament the entire year, which is honestly sad to see, because all the rumors are pointing towards that being the last tournament that W7M played together with that 5. So, you know, they'll probably never be as good as they were this year. And it's unfortunate that a team that was honestly as dominant as them was unable to come away with a victory. You know, I'm sure they're not complaining. They won a lot of money this year, over $500 and maybe even over $600,000, but they just were never able to take home the title. But I think we should show them their flowers and acknowledge that, you know, they may not have won SI, but I think over the year period, they were the best team in the world. And yeah, you know, the rumors do seem to lead to them breaking up potentially and branching out to new teams. But that's the nature of the game in esports. And then we've got to talk about apparently what is the best team in EU now, G2, who came all the way from losers bracket 1 because they lost 2-0 to Wolves in losers bracket 7-8, or winners bracket 7-8, 7-8, and they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches in a row to win SI. Along the process, they eliminated FaZe, Dark Zero, M80, Wolves, Astralis, OXG, and W7M. So they eliminated every NA team, basically, as I think, besides Sonics. They eliminated LATAM teams of W7M and FaZe, and then they knocked out their regional, their region friends of Wolves. I think, obviously, they're the biggest shock of the tournament. Even after groups where they played really well, it was still hard to, like, place them like top 4, because you're just like, how much do we really believe in this team? And I know a lot of people are going to be like, you know, Citizen was a problem. Obviously, you know, they get rid of him, and then they win SI, and we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up. But it's not even so much the Citizen thing. Look how well their team played, and we'll jump to stats real quick here. Look at these stats for their team. 2 players had over 300 kills. 2 players had over 200 kills, almost 250 on both of them. Their support player had 165 kills. Their entries, +7, +4. So they're +30, -3, +27 entry. They had 39 plants, 24 clutches. The lowest cost on their team was 66%. So you could say they got a great replacement for Citizen. Benja was the MVP of SI, set the kill record. Absolutely insane event by him, plus 87. Kind of a coming out party in a way for those of you who maybe weren't as familiar with him, playing on a smaller team or a less acclaimed team like Heroic. But the team of G2 played so well. It's like unbelievable. Like, look at these stats. 4 players over 200 kills, 2 players over 300 kills, 165 kills from Blur. Like, what an event from them. And obviously a deserved win. As far as I know, too, I believe Alamau was IGLing the team. So, you know, IGLing the team, going plus 44, plus 12 on entry, and winning SI. I mean, pretty crazy event from him if that's true. I think if you watch G2, we notice a clear difference in how they were playing. It was a lot faster, a lot more, I guess you'd say a lot less structured, and maybe more taking chances and like being all over the map and being fast. And, you know, maybe that's what Alamau brought as an IGL, which is more of a, you know, I hate to use the, you know, the term LATAM, but just maybe more of the aggressive kind of outlook on the game. Whereas before, maybe they had differing ideologies. So, obviously, huge congrats to G2 winning. I mean, again, you look at their stats, it's like just an unbelievable tournament from their team. I think we're all very curious to see how they do in the first stage of EUL coming up, to see if this was just like, you know, they had the hot hand here. Because remember, in stage 3 of EUL, they did not do well. Now, obviously, they have a roster change, but that wasn't even a roster change that they wanted to make. I don't know if you guys read the article where Fabian was talking about the roster change, but he said he had his eyes on 2 players. And what we know is that that other player was Blaz, or Blaz, however you want to pronounce it. And Fabian actually wanted Blaz, but the players... from what I understand, the players said no, and the players are the reason the team got Benja. So in a different world, it's Blaz playing for G2, and then who knows how the tournament goes for them. So obviously, huge congrats to G2. Great tournament from them. Huge tournament from Benja and Doki. Over 300 kills apiece. Great IGLing from Alamau. The whole team went off. Even Blur, I know people are going to see this negative 45, and, you know, I'm sure roast, but... I mean, he's putting up 165 kills on a support role. He's got 31 plants, 5 clutches. I think they all did their job, and, you know, they were deserving winners. The question with them is going to be, how are they going to look after SI? Is this kind of a notice to the rest of the league that, you know, G2 are, I guess, back in a way? And then looking at OXG, the highest placing NA team. Obviously, Astralis did get 4th as well, so half of the top 4 were NA. And we can go look at Astralis real quick and take a look at their stats. And what does this stats tell us? Well, it tells us Newers is crazy. 1.2 rating, plus 61 overall, plus 21 on entry. Not a lot of clutches, not a lot of plants, but he doesn't need to do that. Averaging 0.98, almost a kill a round. Huge in tournament from him. I think we're all used to Newers being in conversation, especially if you're more familiar with NA, because you know, he's been honestly dominant all year long. But kind of doing this at SI stamps that name now, where it's like when you're talking about the best players in the game, I don't think you can have that conversation without Newers anymore. I mean, I just think that point blank, he has established that if he's not on the level of Shaiko in terms of like a pure fragger, he's right there. Because these are unreal numbers, especially for his first ever SI. Fox had a good tournament. Obviously, Fox is always, I'm sure, IGLing a bit. Plus 19 overall. Did struggle on the entry, but had 8 clutches, which I think was second most in the tournament behind J9. Vert, I know Vert gets a lot of heat from people, but I think Vert played his role really well at this tournament. 174 kills, 177 deaths, -3 overall, positive on entry, had some clutches, had a few plants. They probably would have maybe liked a little bit more here, but I do think, if I recall, he had a really poor like final match. So I think going into that last match for them, he was actually having a positive tournament, which is, I think, is a great sign for OXG, because what a lot of, I think, OXG fans would say they worry about, especially like internationally, is Vert sometimes tends to struggle at the big events. He's I guess known more as more of an inconsistent player, and I think here Vert had a very good tournament. I think they would be very happy with that. I'm sure. They did get third place. They're not going to be unhappy with a third place performance at SI. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, they say they could have been in the finals. That could have been them beating W7M. But if we look at this, I mean, G2 15-6 them, right? 6-8, 7-0. Like, I don't think they were on that level. And then going to Dream. Dream struggling KD-wise. He was negative 39, negative 9 on entry. 33 plants, which I believe is the most plants in the tournament. So he had a good, I guess you, and this is where I think the conversation for a support gets interesting, right? So like, let's just look at the overall plant leaders in the tournament. These are the overall plant leaders, right? 33, Dreams negative 39, 31, Blur's negative 45, 29, Brid's negative 27. Like, if you're getting the bomb down this much, you just straight up, you're not going to have good stats. Kino's kind of an outlier here. He's +7 overall, 13 plants, right? But to be honest, he's not planting as much as a lot of teams comparatively. Keep in mind, these teams played more maps. But I mean, Kino's the only support player literally on this board who's even positive, right? So that just says hell of a tournament from Kino, honestly. But that's another thing that I always think about when people are talking about stats and roasting other players for bad performances. It's like, look at people playing similar roles. Dream might have gone negative 39, but honestly, that's in line with all the other support players. Somebody has to go negative, and, guys getting the bomb down 33 times. I mean, what more do you want, right? Like, he's doing his job. I think he had some big moments. How many clutches did Dream have? Only 2 clutches. Maybe you want a little more clutches from him, from like that smoke roll, because he's probably last alive a lot. But again, I don't think you can. You might look at the stats and be like, well, the guy got shit on. But I don't really think that's the case. I think that's just the role. Somebody's got to get shit on. And speaking of getting shit on, I think honestly, Sweater had a pretty bad tournament. Now, again, we can say this was Sweater's first SI. And that is fair, but then we're talking about Newers. That was Newers' first SI too, and he's literally +78 over Sweater. But I think the thing with Sweater is this was not only his first SI, it's his first ever international tournament. Because remember, he was on Beast Coast, who were not good. They didn't qualify for anything. And then he joined OXG, and they had a bad stage 3. So Sweater literally had never played against any international competition. And he shows up here, and honestly, maybe he gets a little bit of a reality check. He had a 58% cost. He's negative 16 on entry. So even though Newers is +21 on entry, Sweater almost was so bad single-handedly that he offsets that. Negative 18 overall. He's playing their entry in their main room. Honestly, I think if they have a better tournament from Sweater here, maybe they end up in the finals. Because if we're like looking at OXG's performance compared to like G2 or W7M, what's the main difference? 4 guys are putting up numbers. 1 guy's, he's getting shit on, doing the dirty work, right? Like, people are putting up numbers. 1 guy's getting shit on. Look at OXG. 2 guys are putting up numbers. 1 guy's okay. 2 guys are getting shit on. So Sweater here, to me, is their performance at cost. Obviously, they did get third, so I don't think, how much is he really costing? But I think this is a big learning experience for Sweater going forward. We expect to see OXG continue to be at international events, and they're going to need more from him if they want success at those events. Or honestly, he might be at risk. I guess the question I would have for you is, we all know Laxing's success at international events. And Laxing does play much differently from Sweater. But if Laxing is playing here, does OXG do better? Do they do worse? Or is it the same? Does Sweater's aggressiveness give them something that they didn't have before? Or does Laxing just flat out do so much better that maybe they do sneak into the finals? Man, going to look at Astralis. Astralis, obviously, probably the craziest tournament of any team. And today I did see some rumors about their team. I don't want to speak on that because obviously I don't, I don't know anything until there's an announcement. But Astralis got 4th place at the major. Or sorry, 4th place at SI. They got 2nd place at the major earlier this year. But they got 4th place at SI with their best player having a 1.03 rating, plus 18, -2 on entry. Look at these clutches, though. 10 clutches from J9, most in the tournament. As a team, Astralis had 29 clutches. So literally 4 maps worth of clutches for Astralis here. Everybody else on the team negative. Iconic did go positive in entry. Spiff -10 entry. Forest -19 entry. Shuttle -16 entry. Spiff -14 overall. Forest -16 overall. Shuttle -78 overall. Forest did have 17 plants. Shuttle had 10 plants. And, I think we do give Spiff some credit. Obviously, you look at his numbers. He didn't necessarily play amazing. He's -14, -10 on entry. Those aren't numbers that you're necessarily saying this guy was, shitting on people. But coming into this, I believe he had a 0.96 rating in SCS, which is a tier 3 event, right? And we were all, and I still stand by my opinion on Spiff before the tournament, was that he was underwhelming and that Astralis did not look good. I think you could even talk to other pro teams who scrimmed Astralis leading up to SI, and they would probably say the same thing. Now, granted, at this event, he 100% played better. He had a 0.96 rating at SI. So essentially, he had the same rating in SI that he did have a tier 3 league. I think that's great for him. Remember, Spiff is the youngest player in the entire tournament. No experience playing Pro League. Never played an international event. Never played LAN. So a lot of firsts for him. And I think he should be proud of that performance. Even if it, on paper doesn't necessarily mean he's lighting the world on fire. But I think the points to talk about is Forest, I would say, had a rough event. I think the entire year, Forest has been their best player, arguably. He's kind of their entry. He was really struggling on entry. I mean, he had a ton of entry engagements. He had 85 entry engagements, but he was -19 on the entry. He did have 6 clutches and 17 plants, so he's kind of doing it all. And if you look at their stats, this is another team where honestly, the kill total's really even outside of the one outlier player. 4 of them over 200 kills. Now, they maybe don't have the same stat plus minus attribution as like G2. But you kind of are seeing a theme of what the good teams have going, though, right? Where it's like, everybody honestly is getting like a pretty even kill total outside of like maybe the entries get a little bit more kills. And then there's kind of one guy who just gets shit on. Now, it doesn't necessarily work out the same way here because Shuttle's not their main planter. Forest had more plants, even though they are both breach. But yeah, it's a very interesting tournament for Astralis because I think if you look at these stats, if I were to tell you that Astralis' best player was rated 1.03, he went plus 18. They only had one player who was positive on entry. As a team, they were, -35, -37. They were -39 on entry. They had 29 clutches, right? What does Astralis look like if they don't have 29 clutches? But you can't take it away from them because in a way, that's kind of how they play. They're so fast. They're so crazy. They're so surprising in what they do that they clutch a lot of these rounds because you're just in like such awkward positions. The time's running out. Like they just put you in weird situations. And obviously some teams helped them out. Shuttle had a crazy clutch against Sonics. He also had a crazy clutch, I believe, against Koi on Bank. Yeah, he had another really good clutch against Koi on Bank. I know J9 had a crazy clutch against BDS on Theme Park. He had 10 double-digit clutches is insane. So yeah, I mean, interesting tournament from Astralis. I know there's some rumors out right now on Astralis. I don't want to speak to that because we don't know the validity of it. But I will say, you know, if it so happened to be true that this team was available, I don't think there would be any. You know, I think people would be in line to pick up this roster, especially with their culture that they've built with Call Out. Not only by a potential new org coming to NAL, but by some of the teams that right now don't have a player. You know, if Astralis were available, if you're, you know, I don't want to say Mirage just because, you know, there's kind of issues that a lot of players have had with them. But if you're like a Beast Coast or you're a Parabellum, you can pick up an org that or a team that just went top 4 at SI if they're actually available. Again, we don't know the validity to that, but I mean, that's something you have to be considering if you're then. And then moving backwards, we'll see Wolves and Koi. So the 2 EU teams also eliminated here. To me, I think the biggest surprise here is Wolves. I just flat out, I'm honestly, and this is going to be some little hater in me, I still don't think Wolves are very good. I just feel like when I watch them, I'm unimpressed. I don't see anything special going on. I don't see any kind of crazy strategies. I just think they're very, I guess you'd say, mid. Right? And let's look at their stats. So, I mean, in a way, kind of like Astralis. They have Mowgli, who's their number 1 rated player at 1.04 rating. No one on their team had 200 kills. Mowgli had 90 entry engagements. He went plus 16 on entry. 15% survival rate, which has to be among the lowest in the tournament. Bibu had 10 plus 10 on the overall, even on entry. 6 clutches for him. And then look at the rest of their team. Shinka, negative 25. P4, negative 26. Rise, negative 28. You know, honestly, if you're wondering how they got to this point, you're looking at this. Their entries. Mowgli did a great job getting entries for them. Rise was pretty solid on the entries. Bibu wasn't costing. They had a pretty good entry differential. And they had a good amount of clutches. Nothing crazy. But they had, what, 17 clutches? So yeah, I think it was very surprising to see Wolves make it this far. To me, Wolves are a team where I look for a potential roster change, maybe. I'm not saying they will. I believe they're like a close team, and they're also a French-speaking team. So obviously, you know, when you're a team that doesn't speak English, to be honest, it is harder to find players because, you know, they have to speak the native language. But, I mean, in a player who was playing in NA was released recently, Blaz, who was rumored to, I think he was even rumored to Wolves at one point, and I know he was the player that Fabian wanted for G2. He's just sitting out there. You know, if you're looking at P4 over the past 6 months, 0.9 rating. If you're looking at Rise, who I think is traditionally struggling, but not necessarily on that entry role, but he is playing Buck Yeager. I think this is a team that makes sense for Blaz. I don't know if they do anything because, again, you don't really know the team dynamics without being on the team. But to me, this is a team to look at for a roster change, even though they did just have a top 6 placing at SI. And then we can look at Koi. Koi, I think, came out at group stage, honestly, as one of the favorites to win the tournament. They beat W7M in their group pretty impressively to end up getting the first seed. They then 2-0 Dark Zero pretty handily. And then they got whooped by W7M, and they honestly weren't the same. They made playoffs, won one match, got top 6. So that's the advantage of getting top 2 in your group. They won 3 rounds against W7M, played Astralis, lost 7-5, 7-5, 8-7. So that very easily could have been them moving up to this top 4. Literally 1 round difference, I believe. Forest won a 1v1. Looking at their team, Spoit continues to be huge for them. Plus 40 overall, plus 10 on entry. Another team with no players with 200 kills. Not a lot of plants on this team. 17 plants, although if you look at their map count, it's honestly significantly lower than a lot of the teams that did make playoffs. Kanto struggled a bit. -11, -2 overall. I know Kanto was also involved in some rumors going on during the tournament, which said, his spot may be up in jeopardy at the end of the tournament. I don't know if that's true, but I do think this is another team to potentially look at for a roster change. Again, I think this is a team where they're all friends, and we don't know the team dynamics necessarily, but I do think this is potentially a team where a roster change could be due. And I think whenever you see a team where it's like very uneven kill distribution, that's where it's always going to be. These teams where it's like, everybody's kind of doing their part in a way. It's hard to find a weakness where it's like, we can look at Koi and immediately spot weaknesses, right? Kanto is -11. Leon struggled, but he was playing the support and he had the most plants. Cryin had a bad event, but Cryin is normally one of the best players for Koi. So I do think, whether those rumors were true or not, if Koi made a roster change, I do think it's Kanto who ends up on the chopping block. I guess we'll see how true those rumors are. And again, another situation where it's, kind of not like W7M, not like G2, honestly, not even like some of the other teams we've already talked about, where it's just like not an even kill distribution at all. We have one guy kind of hard carrying, Deepek's playing fine. The rest of them not necessarily doing horrible, like -11, -5, -16, 0.95, 0.96 ratings. They're not, they're not doing horrible. But what did Koi look like if Kanto's +11 instead of -11? That's 22 more kills, What do they look like if they have a better entry player here? So I think that's something to keep in mind going forward for Wolves. Going back again, now we've got M80 and BDS getting eliminated. Obviously, BDS came into the tournament probably as the favorite along with W7M. They came off a major performance, and to be honest, they were shaky all tournament. They were shaky in group stage. They did get second in their group, but I mean, if you look, they had no 2-1s or no 2-0s. I believe there was a stat, and I don't know if this was the case by the end of the tournament, but there was a stat where they won their map pick every match, and they lost the opponent's map pick every match. So every game was just coming down to a best of 3. And if you look here, what do you see? 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. So I think that stayed true the entire tournament. And what that says to me about BDS is they don't have a great map pool. If they always win their map, but they never win the other team's map, that just means that their map pool is not great, right? It means they're so, and maybe this is a strategy for them, maybe in scrims and practice, they focus so much on the maps that they play that they don't worry about the other maps, and they're just saying to themselves, they will never lose their maps, and they basically just hope the other team picks one of their main maps. But I mean, that's a very risky strategy, as we see here. They played 8 matches, they won their map 8 times, and they lost the opposing team's map pick 8 times. I mean, that's not a great tournament strategy, because it's also doesn't it get tiring? Speaking from a player point of view, I feel like it gets tiring too, just playing constant, back-to-back banger matches every single time. They're playing BDS 6-8, 7-2, 6-8. They're playing Liquid 4-7, 7-4, 7-4. They're playing M&M 7-5, 7-0, 4-7. They're playing Astralis 7-5, 7-1, 7-5. These guys, they're constantly playing. Every match is a fucking banger. They get no rest time, and they're showing everything because they're playing so many maps. Literally every strat, any idea that BDS would have, they're showing because they have to go 3 maps every single time, and it's also exposing weaknesses in their map pool, right? Astralis picks Villa, they lose. M&M picks Border, BDS lose. Liquid picks Chalet, BDS lose. W7M pick Clubhouse, BDS lose. Right? It shows weaknesses to the other teams as well, that, hey, these guys can't play half the fucking maps in the pool. And then we go to look at their stats, and honestly, wasted tournament for them. How do you waste this performance from Shaiko? Averaging over a kill a round. He's plus 83, right? He had 273 kills, and they went out top 8. You know, Ben just set the kill record for the event, but how many kills would Shaiko have had if he made it to the finals here? He had 283. He had 273 kills, and he could have played 1, 2, 3, 4 more matches. He might have had 400 kills. So honestly, wasted effort from them. Kind of a situation we talked about earlier where Shaiko was going so crazy on the entry. He's plus 22. That Alims had to just offset that and go negative 16 on the entry. So it's almost just a complete wash. The other players all doing very well on the entry. Plus 8 for Liquefact. Renshiro plus 5. You look at Brid stats, negative 27, not great. But he had 29 plants and 24 maps. So he's getting over a plant a map. Also had 7 clutches. Renshiro went negative 7. Which is okay, definitely respectable, not the end of the world. Plus 5 on entry. Alims, I think Alims actually started playing better in the playoffs, but bad tournament from him. Negative 12 isn't the end of the world, right? But you got a guy going plus 83 and a guy going plus 40. They're combined plus 30 on entry. Like, how do you waste this effort, you know? It goes back to what we were talking about. Where, you know, looking at OXG, it's kind of a 2-man effort. Looking at BDS, kind of a 2-man effort. Looking at Wolves, kind of a 2-man effort. Looking at Koi, kind of a 2-man effort. Look at the teams at, like, W7M, 4-man effort. 4-man effort, you know? There needs to be more, I think, in this stage of Siege. And even if you look at Astralis, yes, they don't have the best stats, but look at the kills. It's a 4-man effort. 4 players over 200 kills. It might not be the prettiest stat-wise, but they're all contributing. And I think this shows us at this point in Siege, you know, having people who can actually get kills, who can actually match the individual kill potential of their teammates is important. And right here, we're not seeing it. You know, I don't think we need to worry about a roster change from BDS. I think that would be shocking, considering them coming off of a major victory, a top 8 placing at SI. You know, maybe they just write this down as like, okay, it wasn't our time. They're still happy with their year. But, you know, this is the kind of kill distribution that doesn't work anymore. You can't just have like a carry and 4 guys like hanging on for dear life. I think at this point in the game, you just need more even contribution. And so let's go back to M80. And honestly, it's kind of the same thing we just talked about. And we're noticing a pattern here. And what I would say a lot of the good teams are. And that is this kind of 4-man kill effort. Looking at M80, Diaz plus 32, plus 6, 8 clutches, 4 plants. Kino, as we mentioned earlier, the only support player, I think, with over 10 plants who went positive. So honestly, really impressive tournament by him. His stats don't look crazy. But he's going plus 7, getting the bomb down, 4 clutches. Like, you take, like, just to bring it back up, let's look at the plants. You have to find, let's see, when do you find another player who's positive? You have to go all the way down to Volps with 6 plants to find another support player who's positive. Every other player here is negative besides Kino. And he's got 13 plants. So honestly, really impressive tournament from Kino. Obviously, I'm sure there's moments that he would want back, but I don't think it, I mean, that honestly puts his name in best support in the world conversation to me. He can get the bomb down and he can get kills. You know, you don't have to worry about that. Yogg, pretty solid tournament from him. Although, again, the entry, I think, for M80 is their big problem if we're looking at this. They do finish negative overall in entry. They also don't get a ton of plants. You know, they had 21, which I guess is fine. They didn't play a ton of maps. But I think this entry rating is really hurting them. Gomez had a huge tournament because I know, talking to Yardy, I believe on the prediction podcast we did beforehand, his big question was Gomez in these international events, and he thought Gomez was honestly on fraud watch. Gomez played really well in this tournament. He's plus 10 overall. He might be -1 on entry, but that's over 63 engagements. Like, this is a good tournament from Gomez. You would take this tournament from your entry player every time. Basically, even on entry, 63 engagements, plus 10 overall. And here comes the outlier. And again, I think this is a person who is definitely on might get dropped watch, if we want to call it that. I've even seen rumors, I don't know the validity of it, but I've seen rumors that a player from W7M might be going to M80. I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, we'll have to see. But Spirits went -41. -4 on entry, 22% survival, 56% cost. He only had 119 kills, right? And I look at his roles, and I think that the team loses faith. Like, I don't think the team is very confident in Spirits either. Because Spirits is playing smoke. Kino is, if not the best smoke player in NA, he's a guy who even one stage had 100% smoke rating. And they're putting Spirits on smoke a little bit now. And to me, that maybe says they don't have a lot of faith in him getting kills. Right? So I think for a team like M80, again, this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, where there's the 4-man contribution. The problem with this team and the 4-man contribution, right, is that part of this contribution is from their support player. And their entry player, I guess you'd say, I mean, he has 56 entry engagements. He went -41. It's honestly impressive that M80 got a top 8 placing with their entry player going -41. So I think M80, a Spirits roster change wouldn't shock me. I've heard rumors of that. Obviously, we don't know the validity of it. When you think of M80, they're also a team of really good friends. So it wouldn't be easy for them to make a roster change. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to win. It's a business, and sometimes you need to put winning and yourself and the team ahead of your friendships. And to me, this player right here is somebody who, if I was him, my butt might be a little clenched about my job. I think Spirits would get picked up by another team if he was released, but I think he has been struggling for sure. And so, going back another round now, we've got SSG, Dark Zero, Team 1, and Eminem. We can take a look at them. Let's look at SSG first off, because I read some rumors on Twitter earlier today. And again, I'm not going to speak on that because I don't know the validity of it. But if we look at SSG, every single player on their team was negative. Yeti was the only player who was positive in entry. They only had 16 plants as a team, only 4 clutches. 62% was their highest cost. Just a very bad tournament. Looking at Fultz, who is their main entry player, he's -20 overall, -4 on entry. It's hard to do anything when your entry player is getting shit on like this, if we're being real. Fultz is a Hall of Fame level Siege player in his career. And I think he even played well NAL Stage 3. But this is just like this is like a not acceptable performance from your entry player. Like, you cannot win if your entry player is putting up these numbers. Which is why I was saying it was so impressive that M80 even got top 8. Looking at the numbers that Spirits was putting up. Because, I think people say that entry is maybe the hardest job, like entry or IGL. But it's also because you live and die by your entry in IGL. Your IGL can make bad decisions, bad calls that cost you the game. If your entry player can never get a fucking opening kill, or your entry player can't get any kills, then you're never going to be man up. You're always going to be man down, or you're never going to be able to take the map. What's one of the issues Space Station had? They're very slow. They had a really hard time attacking. Why could that be? It could be an IGLing issue, or it could be because they're always man down, or they don't have enough kill input. Fultz is their entry player. He has 71 kills the entire event. Bosco has 1 less kill than him, and Bosco is playing Thermite Smoke. So I just think it's a miracle they even got top 12 with these stats. It's unbelievable. Looking at Bosco, not a great tournament from him. -18, 9 plants. We did talk about, this role seemingly at the tournament. Whoever's playing Breach and Bomb Planner is just getting shit on. That's the way it goes. Looking at Yeti had a tough tournament, -11, +1 on entry. Not the worst stats in the world, but not the best. I think Yeti is still having some issues internationally, but again, on a team like this, where they're putting up these kind of stats, I think it's hard to put up stats when you're always playing from behind. And when you can, you're always last second doing things, which I think is kind of the story of the tournament for SSG. Looking at Rampy, actually their second highest rated player at this tournament, -10, -6. There's just honestly, like, looking at their stats, I'm trying to find like positives to talk about. There's just not really any. Hot and Cold was their best player at -5, -1 on entry. I would like to see Hot and Cold on Rampy's roles, personally. I think, I don't know if you guys remember last year's Hot and Cold, who was arguably the best player in NAL, maybe second best player behind Grixer in NAL. He played Sledge, he would play like Malusi, and he was really solid on it. And I think if you look at last year's SI, Hot and Cold was even their best performer at SI on those roles. So I think giving Hot and Cold that flex Sledge role again would be good for him. But yeah, SSG are already in some rumors for roster changes. So I do think it's safe to assume they're going to end up making changes. Because there's just no way if you're SSG the org, you're okay with this. You know. And then we can look at Dark Zero. Dark Zero also finished top 12. And again, it's kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier. Uneven kill output. Gavini, in my opinion, had a pretty good debut. You know, I see a lot of people giving Spiff a lot of props, and deservedly so. But to be honest, Gavini outplayed Spiff. Gavini went -1, -11 on entry. I believe Spiff was like same entry, -18 or something. Same rating even, I'm pretty sure. So I think Gavini had a solid debut. Obviously not lighting the world on fire, but you got to be a special kind of player, I think, to go into your first SI, first tier 1 experience, first pro experience, first lane experience, and just start going nuclear. I don't think that's just a very hard ask. Pamba, obviously, once again, having some really good success internationally. NJR as well. Both of these guys are super consistent for them internationally. NJR went +30, +5, 2 clutches. I know it lists his #1 operator here as Warden, but he's also their main smoke player, which makes it even more impressive he's putting up these stats. Pamba, really solid entry player, +20 overall, +10 on entry. Almost 70 entry engagements. Even had 4 plants. The problem here, obviously, comes down to this. Canadians going -28, playing a flex role. Skies is -48, getting the bomb down. But what did we talk about? It's okay if your bomb planner is putting up these numbers, but you just can't have another player putting up this kind of tournament if you want to have any success. The camera just cut off 1 second. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think we've seen a running theme in this tournament where it's like you need that even kill input from a lot of the more successful teams. And this is a lopsided kill input from Dark Zero. So they either need, and I think the solution here with Dark Zero is Troy just has to play better. Maybe just a bad tournament from Troy. Gavini could also play a bit better with more experience. And they just say that will happen because obviously Skies didn't play well, -50, but we do have to give credence to the guy who's planting the bomb is going to get shit on. That's just what's going to happen. To me, the outlier here is Troy has to have more of an input if he's going to play this role. If he doesn't have that fragging ability anymore, then Troy needs to be on this role, getting the bomb down, and they can pick up another fragger. That's how I see it. I don't know if they will make a change, but I do think Dark Zero are another team to keep an idea of, keep an eye on Dark Zero making a roster change. To me, I think Troy should play support and they get another fragger. I don't think they'll do that because I know Troy prefers to play that flex. And if that's the case, then honestly, they just need a support player who can put up better stats to make up. You know, Troy's the best IGL in the history of the game, right? So you live with him putting up bad stats, but at the same time, you have to make up for him not putting up great stats, which means your support player should be putting up better stats than usual. And obviously, that's not the case here. Also, looking at their entry, Gavini basically offset Pamba's input, and then NJ's input was offset by Troy and Skies, so they were negative on entry overall. They did have a decent amount of clutches. I believe they had 12. They had a lot of plants, which Dark Zero always do. They're an execute-oriented team. I think 35 plants. But, yeah, I think Dark Zero are a team to keep an eye on for a roster change. I don't know that they will. But I do think this is, you know, if we've noticed a trend of the more successful teams, they're kind of going more of an old school way with the way their kill input looks. And going down to Los 1 or former Team 1, I think they overachieved in a lot of people's eyes. I'm sure in their mind they were disappointed because they did come out of groups as the number 1 seed, and then they didn't win a match in the playoffs. They lost to Team 1, 7-3, 8-7. And then they lost to Astralis, 2-1 maps, 7-2, 7-4, 8-7. So again, another map where Astralis literally had to go to the last round of the last map where they could have potentially been top 12. Looking at their stats, what do we see? Same thing we talked about. Very even kill input, and their bomb planner getting shit on. So they're kind of sticking with that. What seems like maybe the meta of how your team should be playing is the guy who's planting the bomb gets shit on, the other 4 guys frag out, which seems to be right now the best way to go about it. Obviously, it's not a must, but I think a lot of the top teams in this tournament kind of have that kind of structure around their kills. Looking at their entries, pretty decent entries. They did finish negative, but not crazy. +4 for my, +2 for Dash. Loban went -2. Remember, this is Loban's first SI, so we went +7 overall, -2 on the entry. RHZ went +4, -7. Even on the support, he did go -26. But he did have 13 bomb plants, and as we talked about with the support players, every single one of them went negative besides Kino. So I think Los 1 are just a team to keep an eye on for the future. I don't think they're going to make any roster changes. I think even if we look at their team structure in terms of their kill output, it's what they would want. It's kind of just a team where it's like, hey, they need more experience, work on the map pool a little bit. Because they did show the potential in group stage where they went undefeated in group stage. They were 4-0. They just, you know, they didn't have it in playoffs for whatever reason. And then I think that another big disappointment would probably be Eminem. You know, coming into the tournament, they really surprised everybody. They went undefeated, didn't lose a map in groups. But then they ended up losing to OXG 2-0, 8-7, 8-7, so super close. Could have gone either way. And then they fall to BDS 7-5, 7-0, 7-4. You never want to be getting 7-0'd, obviously. So maybe their luck kind of ran out. Maybe they showed too much stuff in groups. But if we look at their kill output, they're kind of in the almost at that 4-person, but they offset it just because these 3 guys played so well. Tyrant was +45. Usus was +20. Solotov was +22. But look at their plants. Like, they're not planting the bomb a ton. Right? 7, 6, 2, and 2. Obviously, they didn't play a ton of maps, but that's still a pretty low plant total compared to other teams. Nello was -20. Nafe, their new player, was -6, which I think is still an improvement on Neo. But it's almost like I'm looking at Eminem, and if I'm them, I feel like I wasted a great tournament. Look at their entry stats. They're +22 as a team on entry. They have 3 players who are +20 or better. Tyrant was +45. To me, this is a wasted tournament for them. They could have done this team got top 12. With these kind of numbers, they should be doing way better, in my opinion. Now, obviously, maybe some of this is boosted because of their group performance, but these are just stats where you would expect better. Like, if I'm Tyrant, Usus, and Solotov, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, how the fuck did we get top 12 at SI? You know? I don't think Eminem make a change. They made a change coming into SI, so I wouldn't expect anything from them. But I'm sure they're disappointed. Like, they're a weird team because I would say, like, coming into SI, they would be happy with the top 12. I don't think they had ever placed that high at them. Like, I know last SI, I think they got first rounded, and I think they've been grouped at the majors. But after groups, this is like super disappointing for them because they probably thought we might be able to win this thing, and then they don't even win a playoff match. So I don't anticipate any changes from Eminem. I think they had a good tournament. I think they should be happy with that. But at the same time, you're looking at this and you're like, how the fuck did we fuck that up? You know, our 3 entry players are plus 17. They're all plus 20 or more. How do we leave that one? You know. And then the teams that get first rounded, a lot of disappointments here. I'm sure there's a lot of questions being asked on what happened. We go to Heroic. Heroic kind of had a surprising tournament. I know a lot of people thought Heroic coming into the tournament would end up getting grouped. And I think they end up finished second in their group, but I think they're perceived to be the weakest second seed by a lot of people. And yeah, we look at their team and it's kind of the story of like a hard carry, a guy who's playing okay, and then people getting shit on. Obviously with Uno, he did have 21 plants and 14 maps, which is a lot. But yeah, you're looking at the other guy, Sloth negative 16. Now I know Sloth wasn't even supposed to be at this tournament. So I do think there'll be a roster change there. I assume Sloth won't be on the team going forward. But I don't know about Grizzly. Like, we had this conversation on the playoff podcast with Yardy. Grizzly's negative 13, plus 3 on entry, 2 clutches, 2 plants, 2, like... The thing with Grizzly is I don't think anybody knows what he does. He only has 98 kills, so he doesn't even have 100 kills. He's getting 0.5 kills around. You know, Noodle had a very good tournament. Honestly, super surprising. He got 6th place in the XPL, and then he gets plus 22 at the major. Obviously, I think we've all seen that clip where he was getting yelled at by their coach, Mr. Officer. And I've heard, you know, through that clip that there are attitude issues with Noodle, which will be worked on. And, you know, he's a younger, inexperienced player. So I think you hang on to him and just, you know, give him one more chance about his attitude. And if it doesn't correct itself, then he's got to go. But I think this is a team where you see maybe 2 roster changes. I don't think Sloth will be playing anymore. And honestly, I think Uno's okay. Like, the thing is, when people see stats, they're going to be like, Uno's got to go. He's negative 35. But we're already saying that that role, no matter the player, like, no matter the player, no matter the team, right? This role, they're getting shit on. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's Dream or Brid or Skies or Forest or Geo, you know, or Leon or Bosco. Like, this role, you're just getting shit on, right? So if you think that Uno's a good leader, if you think he's a good IGL, you live with that. Like, he's just going to get shit on, but he's going to get the bomb down, and he's going to help the team win in other ways. Grizzly, I don't know how he's helping the team. He's not getting kills. He doesn't get entry kills. He doesn't plant the bomb. He doesn't really clutch. Like, maybe he's really funny or something. So, yeah, I expect a couple roster changes from Heroic, honestly. I still think they're probably happy with this tournament. Maybe they would have liked to go a little further in top 16, but, you know, a lot of people thought they would get grouped. They, from what I understand, had visa problems with one of their pickups, so Sloth was like a last-minute pickup for them. But yeah, just another example of not even kill distribution. And then go into FaZe. FaZe did lose to G2, who went on to win the tournament. And there are rumors, again, with FaZe potentially bringing in a player for Bullet. I know the rumor that I heard was a player from W7M. I don't want to get into specifics. If you'd like to look that up, I'm sure it's on Twitter, Reddit, or something. But even going into the tournament, I had heard this rumor, so you never know how that affects a team's mental. But the rumor is that Bullet was being replaced, and Bullet was their worst performer here. Negative 12 overall. Vidaking, who's their new replacement for Cameraman, goes negative 13, negative 6 on entry, only 6 plants. I gotta say, obviously their mental could have been a little chalked on FaZe, but, you know, they do better with Cameraman for sure. Like, I don't know the extent of why they ended up replacing Cameraman or what happened, but Cameraman is a better player than Vidaking. Part of what made FaZe so unique, so good, I think, is a lot of what Cameraman brought to the team. So we'll see how that roster change helps over time. You know, it is Vidaking's first major, first international, whatever you want to say. So there is a potential that he improves over time. But, you know, first glimpse, I think it's safe to say, like, FaZe with Cameraman are a better team than they are with Vidaking. Astro, not a great tournament for him. He was honestly playing more of a support role at 9 plants. And then we got the big two, Cyber and Souls. I will say Cyber stats are somewhat boosted. I just want to show this stat because it's like this game was just insane. Where is it? Against Secret, Cyber went plus 17, plus 12 on entry. He went plus 12 on entry in one match. So obviously that helps the stats a little bit. I mean, he was plus 12 on entry for the whole tournament. So literally outside of that tournament, he was plus 5 overall, even on entry or against that match against Secret. No clutches on him or Souls. So honestly, I don't think it was a great tournament from Cyber. He's one of the best players in the world when he's on. I don't think he was necessarily on. He had glimpses and he played well, but he didn't play like the Cyber level we're seeing. Souls is just a beast. I mean, what can you say? I think Souls is, if not the best, in the conversation for the best support player in the world. Now, we can say, is he even a support player? Because he doesn't plant the bomb. But he kind of plays support roles. He's playing like Lion and Smoke. So it's kind of hard to say what role he even is. Maybe he's just like a flex secondary support. Because he doesn't actually plant the bomb. But either way, I mean, Souls is just a beast. What can you say? Guys, plus 34, plus 10 on entry, 70% cost. 0.9 kills per round. So another huge tournament from him, but I'm sure disappointing for FaZe. I'm sure even with the impending roster change or rumored roster change, they still expected to do better than they did. But such is life. And now looking at Sonics. Sonics have stats where it's like, if you look at the team, you're wondering how the fuck they got top 16, right? 4 players plus 20 or better. Geo negative 13, but 16 plants. Gunner negative 2, but 7 plants. 54 entry engagements on Gunner, plus 12 entry on Citizen, negative 3 entry on Rexen, negative 4 on, plus 4 on Pablo. You know, their costs are all pretty high. Lowest kill total on their team is 0.6 kills a round. This is an example of, you know, the even kill distribution that we've been talking about of the really good teams. And yeah, I you know, you look at Sonics, and if I show you these stats, you probably say, you know, that's a top 6, top 4 team. They've got, 28 plants, 16 clutches. Every single player is over 100 kills in 14 maps. 3 players are plus 20 or better. It's honestly hard to see how they fuck this up, but I think if you watch the games, we all know what happened, right? Couldn't close out rounds for Sonics. They got a lot of these bombs down, but I don't know if they won a lot of those post plants. And on defenses, the late round was kind of a collapse. So obviously Sonic's not happy with this tournament. I think if you look at their individual input, they're probably fine with this. Like, nobody really played bad, right? I don't think anybody looking at this really played poorly. It just was the collective team effort wasn't there. I guess the hope would be, with more time together, with more practice, the things like post plants, executes, late round defenses gets corrected, and in theory the team is fine. But obviously a disappointing result for Sonics, losing 2-1 to Dark Zero, losing 2-1 to Astralis. I do think, and again, here's me making an excuse for Sonics, I do think with a team that has a new player and limited practice, having to play NA teams in the playoffs was not great for them, because they don't have, going into the tournament, they didn't have a lot of stuff, right? So these are the teams they practiced against. So these teams knew a lot of the things they were doing, which I think doesn't help. Maybe in a different world, if they play other region teams, they do better. But either way, I think solid individual performances from Sonics, but obviously terrible team effort. And finally, going on to Liquid. Liquid, probably along with Sonics, the biggest disappointments in the tournament. You're looking at this and you're like looking at Paulo and you're like, wow, plus 15, plus 5 on entry. Great tournament. And then you're just saying, well, that's Paulo though. Like, that's not actually that good, right? From Paulo, you're used to seeing more. And if I'm Liquid, I'm looking at this and I'm kind of pissed because I just wasted this from Resets. Resets is a player who normally kind of struggles at these tournaments. And he dropped plus 29, plus 11 on entry. He was honestly picking up Nesk's slack. Nesk had probably, if I was to look back in history, this is probably Nesk's worst ever International performance. He went negative 13 overall, didn't even break 100 kills, only 0.6 kills per round, negative 1 on entry, no clutches. This is a really bad tournament from Nesk. I don't think Liquid make any changes here, obviously, but they got to be super disappointed with this. Ask had a really bad tournament for his standards. I think he's usually a good player. If we were to look at him, over the past 6 months, even with that bad tournament, he's still positive, still a good rating. And keep in mind, with Liquid and Sonics, the two teams we just talked about, that's second place from the last major and top 4 from the last major, right? So Liquid went runner-up at the last major, going last map with BDS, who won the major, and then they got first rounded in playoffs. I think the big question here is Lagonis, like what was going on? I know there were some Liquid fans who were co-watching with me, and they were not happy with Lagonis. The Liquid attacks looked really bad, really slow. Lagonis averaged less than a half a kill per round. I'm pretty sure that would be the lowest in the tournament. Let's look. The only person averaging less kills per round than Lagonis is Blur, Shuttle, and Julio. But what do they all have in common? Way more successful teams. So the IGLing was just not on point for Lagonis. Just struggling. But yeah, I don't think we see any changes from Liquid. I know there are some people saying, is it time for Nesk to retire? Is it time for Nesk to leave? I don't think that's happening. He's not going to, If Nesk was even thinking about retiring, there's no way he's retiring on that. Right? Like, there's no way Nesk is going to go out with that performance. Even if he wanted to retire, he's now forced to keep playing. Because there's no way he's going to go out on that. Right? That would just kind of be like a sad closure to the career for Nesk. So I don't think we see any changes there. And that's all the playoffs. Now, I did want to talk briefly about the structure of this tournament because I don't like it. So I'm fine at SI, right, with 4 teams getting out of groups. And I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I think that structure, I don't think there's going to be like qualifiers anymore for SI. I think it's just like you direct in on points. But to me, the way it's structured, it almost makes groups irrelevant. If you're putting 3 teams from groups in a winner's bracket, your group performance is honestly doesn't even matter. Because no offense to APAC, but APAC are getting last if they're in your group, right? So all you have to do is beat one team, and that means you literally just have to win one match, and you're in winner's bracket. You just have to beat the team that is like in competition for you. To me, it eliminates the seriousness of group stage and doesn't make them mean much, right? Like, let's look at the standings here. I can zoom out real quick. OXG, they were the 3rd seed. W7M were the 3rd seed. G2 were the 2nd seed. Astralis were the 4th seed. Wolves, 3rd seed. Of the top 6 teams at of the top 6 teams at SI, only Koi was a number 1 seed. So I think a change that they should consider doing is top 2 from each group go to winners, right? And then there's no bye. It's just the number 1 seeds play the number 2 seeds, and they could do the draft pick thing or whatever. And then the 3 and 4 seeds from each group, they go to losers bracket. And in round 1, the 3 and 4 seeds play each other to move to round 2 of losers bracket, where they would play the loser of the 1 versus 2 seeds. So it adds more importance to group stage because you need to get top 2 to get winners bracket. And teams will take it more seriously and maybe not hide stuff, maybe put in more of an effort because they don't matter. Like I just said, of the top 6 teams, only one of them, which is Koi, was an actual number 1 seed. And you might say, well, there'll be less matches then. And it's like, not really, because then you're adding a match of 3 versus 4 seeds. You're adding a round of lower bracket. And even if there were less rounds, then that means the tournament will go faster and you can have more matches on stage. So instead of it being top 6, maybe you could show top 8 on stage. Because if you can get to the top 8 faster, then you can maybe have the stage earlier, and then you have more games to watch for the fans. Because I know a gripe a lot of people have is if you flew out to SI, you flew out for 6 matches, right? No, for 6 matches. And a couple of these were blowouts, like G2 2-0 to Stralis. Not necessarily a blowout, but G2 2-0 OXG was a blowout, and the finals a 3-1. So of all the matches that you saw, if you went to SI, you know, this was kind of a one-sided match, G2 and Wolves. The only match that I actually think was even exciting, honestly, is Koi and Astralis. That was the only match that was really exciting. Every other match, if you're a fan that went to SI, like, you pretty much knew who was winning already. Like, of these matches, there was 1 7-0, 2 7-0s. Like, there are 7-0s happening on the stage. So I do think potentially looking at a new format to the tournament would be interesting to make it more competitive. Because right now, like, it doesn't make sense that it's harder to make it out of groups at a major than it is at SI. SI is the world championship. It should be harder. These are better teams. It's all the best teams in the world. The structure of the tournament should be harder. Instead, the structure is easier. It's very forgiving. So I think they should look at the structure of SI. And then let's just go ahead and look at, you know, give people their flowers. Benja set the kill record, plus 87. And what's even crazier to think about here is Benja went plus 87. Shaiko was plus 83, and Benja played 6 more maps. And he was averaging almost 0.1 more kills per round. Like, if BDS's team didn't let Shaiko down, what kind of... Is this guy dropping 400 kills in the tournament? Looking at entry, again, got to give Shaiko his flowers, plus 22 on entry. He was the #1 entry player in the tournament, even though he didn't play as many maps. Newers was 2nd. Herds was 3rd. Kills per round, Shaiko and Newers and Benja leading the way. Resets up there. Really good tournament for him, like we said. Got to give some props to J9. Double-digit clutches. I mean, this might be the first time I've ever seen double-digit clutches at, like, a major tournament. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. That's just insane, honestly. Double-digit clutches. Fox also up there. 3 and A people leading the top 4 clutches. I don't know if that means they bait or what, but that's just an insane amount of clutches. Dream leading the way with 33 plants. Blur dropping 31 plants. Had 165 kills, 67% cost, 5 clutches himself. I know people shit on Blur, and sometimes deservedly so, for sure. Only 0.47 kills per round, but, you know, I bet G2 probably say they don't make it there without Blur, you know. In some way, he was helping them win the rounds, helping them win the games. We can take a look at the shitters now. Shuttle, -80 almost. Only 10 plants, -16 on entry. You know, there's that rumor going around about Astralis. We don't know what's going to happen there. But I think if they're potentially switching orgs or something anyway, I don't know that Shuttle makes it, even though they did just get top 4. You know, that's a guy I'd be worried about my job. But at the same time, it's crazy to say this. At the same time, they don't make it there without Shuttle. Shuttle had the 4v1 clutch against Sonics. He had the 4v1 clutch against Koi on Bank. So, like, in some weird, sick, demented world, Shuttle actually was a big part in them getting that placing. Skies, -48 overall. I don't think Skies is taking any heat at all. And he did have a lot of plants, but he didn't play great. I think he's somebody who you keep an eye on. I kind of already talked about Spirits, obviously. I think Spirits is on life alert right now. He needs to be calling life alert. The guy went -41, -4 on entry with 0 plants. I mean, this is arguably the worst stat line in the entire tournament. I can't lie. -41, -4 on entry. He only played 18 maps, and he had no plants. So he was -41 playing entry with no plants. Like, we were roasting Foltz earlier about his entry stats. Honestly, Spirit stats are just as bad. It's just that his team is better, so they place higher. The people don't talk about it as much. But that's a super disappointing tournament from Spirits. Like, that's pretty bad. And again, going down here, I don't want to really roast the bomb planters because we've already kind of established if you plant the bomb, you get shit on. Slevin and Savage, not a great tournament from them. Rising Canadian, maybe too old to be playing these roles. Maybe need to give that to a little bit of a younger guy. You know what I'm saying? I believe the other thing we didn't touch on was, and I just want to talk about this again. I talked about it at the beginning, but these stats by G2 are so impressive to me. And obviously, you know, as I said earlier, everyone's going to be like, well, it's because Citizen's not on the team anymore. And maybe that changes it, just because I think their playstyle was much different without Ben. I think Alamau was IGLing, and they definitely had more of a aggressive playstyle, 100%. But look at the fucking stats for this team. Look at the entry kills. They had 2 players with 300 or more kills. Virtue almost had 250. Basically 2 players with 250 plus kills. Like, their stats as a team are just fucking unreal. It's obvious why they won. They just have them, and W7M both have unreal kill distribution if you look at their team. It's not a surprise to see them there. Both have really good entry numbers. Both get the bomb down a lot. And I think it's actually pretty interesting to look at how similar their stats are, maybe to a lesser scale. G2 played more maps. But statistically, like, their team output is very similar. You know? It's not that far off from them. In a way, W7M and G2 play pretty similar, I guess, if you really sit down and look at it. But yeah, obviously, I think from what we know, NAL, EUL, all the leagues are supposed to start in a few weeks. I believe they said on the stream like the week of March 6th or something. So we'll see how these teams look off that break. If you remember last year after SI, a lot of the top teams kind of got shit on stage 1, and then did better as the year went on. So we'll see if that kind of hangover effect happens again. It's a super quick turnaround if they are in fact beginning March 6th for all the teams. So, you know, roster changes and all that stuff have to be done pretty soon. But yeah, obviously congrats to G2. Congrats to all the teams that made it. Congrats to Shuttle on getting top 4 while going negative 80 with 10 plants. And yeah, we'll be back for If Supr Says It episode 14. What I think I want to do is start doing summaries of each week of the leagues. So like have a If Supr Says It, see like Rainbow Six and review, right? So like after EUL, NAL, and LATAM are done, we'll have a podcast talk about the week, what happened. Next week, do the same thing. So it can be more of a weekly series, and rather than it being rather than it being a guest oriented thing, we can have guests, but it can also just be more Siege, talking Siege and what's going on. I will also probably have one of these out for a looking at the roster changes. So once roster lock passes and a lot of the announcements are made or rumored, whatever, we can take a look at some of the changes and see what's going on. In NA especially, it seems like there's going to be some org shifts, some team shifts, whatnot. So we can go back all through that once that's done. I think the roster lock, obviously the roster lock has to be before the end of the beginning of the stages. So probably beginning of March if I had to guess. But yeah, thanks for watching. If Supr Says It, episode 13. I will see you guys for the next one.